The honourable member for Foothills.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And it's unfortunate that I have to rise to speak to this issue. This could have ended days ago had the Liberal government capitulated and shown the documents that they are obviously very frightened to show Canadians of the level of scandal that is in those documents. Because what we are now facing as parliamentarians is a Parliament and a House of Commons and a government that's in complete crisis. That the lengths of this Prime Minister will go and his office will go to cover up this latest scandal is incredible. To basically shut down Parliament and not have any government business happening just to protect your own hide, I think is very disingenuous to the members who are here, as we are here representing our constituents, but certainly every Canadian who is expecting better of their government. Now, for all of us as parliamentarians, we represent those constituents who elected us, those families in our ridings who put their trust in us to be here to represent them, and it is their privilege that we are demanding be honoured. The Speaker has ruled that the Liberal government should be handing over the documents to show that Canadians can make that decision for themselves and determine the level of if there should be accountability, if there is scandal, that it certainly seems that the whistleblowers and those who have highlighted $400 million in misappropriated taxpayers' funds, Canadians have the right to see those documents, and Canadians, those who elected us to be here, have the right to make that determination. Because what's at stake here, Madam Speaker, is accountability in this House. The House of Commons, where transparency and trust for all of us should be paramount, not just for the government in power. And they are wielding that power as a sledgehammer over this House of Commons and certainly over Canadians. Because oversight and transparency, I would think all of us would agree, in Parliament is paramount to ensure that that trust in Canadians and what we do here is upheld. And certainly I don't think that that's happening right now as the Prime Minister and the Prime Minister's office is refusing to comply with a decision by the House of Commons and certainly the Speaker to produce those documents, and that the government is doing everything they can to hide that from Canadians. And this comes at a time, Madam Speaker, when Canadians are frustrated, they're angry, they are struggling to make ends meet every single day when you have more than 2 million Canadians visiting a food bank in a single month. Food insecurity in Canada up 111%. Food inflation in Canada 36% higher than it is in Canada or in the United States. While Canadians are struggling, the Prime Minister and the Liberal NDP government is taking Canadians' tax dollars and lining the pockets of their friends and insiders. While we have hundreds, if not thousands, of homeless encampments popping up all across Canada, where I know in Alberta the food bank use is up more than 35%. That's in Alberta. And I've heard similar stories right across Canada. We saw a report the other day in Mississauga, food bank use is up 60%. So while Canadians are struggling just to put food on the table, the Liberal government is lining the pockets of themselves and their friends with Canadian taxpayers, the dollars of Canadian taxpayers. The level of this scandal is like something I don't know many of us have ever seen before in Canada. Because the RCMP Commissioner has confirmed that the Prime Minister's hand-picked directors in what we call the Green Slush Fund are already under criminal investigation. 9 Green Slush Fund appointees have been implicated in funneling this $400 million to their own companies. And the chair of the Green Slush Fund was chosen hand-picked by the Prime Minister, even though he was warned multiple times of a conflict of interest. But once again, the Prime Minister gets his own way and doesn't care about a conflict of interest or the integrity of his government. And the Prime Minister's hand-picked board of directors was funneling $400 million of taxpayer money to their own companies. Like, that is unbelievable. And it didn't happen a couple of times. It happened more than 180 times. Like, the blatant disregard for conflict of interest, for ethics, for integrity, but for the sanctity of taxpayer dollars is just unreal. That it's one thing maybe to do it once or twice and like, okay, we made a mistake. but say, oh, we did it once or twice, we got away with it, let's just keep going. Let's see how far we can get with this. And they did it more than 180 times. And what we have now is the Liberal government not only defying an order of this House to produce those required documents and turn them over to the RCMP, but they're now obstructing justice by refusing to cooperate with that RCMP investigation. The Liberals are deliberately trying to distract and delay by wanting to send this to committee, wasting more time and more energy instead of giving Canadians the transparency they deserve right now by tabling those documents. Madam Speaker, as I said when I spoke on this previously, when I'm robbed or my home is robbed, I call the police. I don't ask my neighbours to get together and form a committee to discuss that robbery. And that's what Canadians are asking for. The Liberals have robbed Canadians of their tax dollars, and Canadians are asking to call the police for an investigation into the misappropriation, the mishandling of their tax dollars. And the level of this, the scale of this corruption is just disgusting, and Canadians are certainly outraged on how the Liberals are taking advantage of their position yet again. It's a story we've heard over and over and over from this Liberal government in particular of enriching their friends and their insiders. And this Prime Minister has taken scandals and conflict of interest and abuse of taxpayer money to new heights like no Prime Minister before. Insiders, bureaucrats, special interest groups have become fabulously wealthy under this Liberal government, while Canadians are struggling every single day just to put food on the table, put fuel in their car, heat their homes, and try and buy that first home. $54 million in ArriveCan, $237 million to a former Liberal MP for unused ventilators, $150 million through SNC-Lavalin for unused field hospitals, $12 million for Loblaws to buy new fridges and freezers, despite record profits on that retailer. Now, I only have 20 minutes, Madam Speaker, so it doesn't really give me enough time to go through every single scandal that the Liberals have endured into their nine years in government. But I think I'd be remiss, and I think my colleagues would really like to hear some of the greatest hits.
Absolutely.
This would make a best-selling K-Tel album, and I may be dating myself with K-Tel, but Hit Express was one of the best ones ever. So I'm going to give you my version of Hit Express. First, we had the ArriveCan scandal. Canada's Ethics Commission ruled that the Prime Minister had indeed broken the conflict of interest rules, accepting vacations and gifts and flights from the ArriveCan in 2016. It was the first time in our history that the Prime Minister had been found to have committed such a transgression. And he's the only Prime Minister to be found guilty of fraud, and the Prime Minister gave himself consent to break that law. That's in the criminal code. And then we'll move to the SNC-Lavalin affair. Former Justice Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould accused her own government and their officials of inappropriately pressuring her to make a decision on the SNC-Lavalin to avoid a corruption trial. That affair led to the resignation of the Prime Minister's top aide, Gerald Butts, the Minister herself, Ms. Wilson-Raybould, and Michael Wernick, the head of the federal bureaucracy at that time, and Public Works Minister Jane Philpott quit, citing that her loss of confidence in the Prime Minister. That the Prime Minister did indeed politically interfere with his own Justice Minister and to try and save his friends at SNC-Lavalin. Then once again, when Canadians were at their most anxious and most stressed in the midst of a pandemic, the Prime Minister found yet another opportunity to try and enrich his friends. When Canadians were struggling, businesses were closing, kids weren't in school, the Prime Minister, instead of helping Canadians, he finds a way to help his friends. With the We Charity scandal, which had previously paid nearly $500,000 to his close family friends to appear at their events, despite claims to the contrary. But the Liberals continued to double down with We, trying to give them tens of millions of Canadian taxpayer dollars to run some programs through the pandemic. And they had defied the order once again in Parliament and blocked key players from We to testify at the Ethics Commission and the Ethics Committee. We'll go back a little bit further to an illegal casino magnate. I don't want people to forget about these, so I want to kind of bring back some blasts from the past. In 2016 and 2017, the Prime Minister participated in fundraising events in Toronto and Vancouver that featured wealthy entrepreneurs. The architect of a heavily armed illegal casino operation in Markham was twice had FaceTimes with the Prime Minister, and surprise, he also has ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Also at those meetings was Chinese billionaire and a member of the Chinese People Consultative Conference who made a $1 million donation to the Pierre Elliott Foundation, which was reported in the Globe and Mail. Then in 2016, one of several additional scandals, all the way back when one of his first scandals with newly elected government surrounded the Prime Minister's attendance at these pay-for-play fundraisers featuring billionaires with connections to the communist regime in China. But perhaps the most concerning is the Liberal government openly ignored warnings from the House of Commons about attempts by communist Beijing to swing the results of 2 federal by-elections. And then in early 2023, most of the board of directors resigned from the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation in light of a $200,000 donation from political strategists and a billionaire with connections once again to the communist regime in China. The foundation misled Canadians when it said the controversial donation was made by 2 Chinese businessmen qualified as a Canadian donation. However, not surprisingly, emails revealed the foundation corresponded with the Chinese Cultural Industry Association, an arm of the Communist Party in Beijing. They told the foundation name, which was listed on the tax receipts for that donation, and where they were to be sent. And again, I don't know who does the oversight with the Liberal government, but I'm hoping. Is there any? Yeah, perhaps there isn't any, and that's obvious with the number of scandals we've had. Including Jasper Otwald, who photographed surfaced of Mr. Otwald posing with Canadian officials, and he obtained a travel visa and secured invitations to formal events with the Prime Minister on the official tour to India. The Liberal Research Bureau, a taxpayer-funded office, pays $75,000 in public funds to Data Sciences, a company owned by Tom Pitfield, a Liberal strategist who ran the last 2 digital election campaigns for the Prime Minister and a childhood friend of the Prime Minister. Now, who could forget, Madam Speaker, the ArriveCan app? It's just another case of this government spending way more money on something that would have taken a reasonable amount of time and a reasonable amount of money to develop an app. But this glitchy, often criticized mobile app that was an absolute disaster and mandatory for Canadians during COVID-19, the initial budget was $80,000. This ended up costing, from what we know, it could be way more, it was at least $60 million. $60 million for an app.
Can't even make it up.
The ridiculous thing is, Madam Speaker, is when the company that was asked to build this this app, GT Strategies, was only 2 employees, did no IT service whatsoever, and yet when the bills kept coming into the government and the bill kept getting higher and higher, no one said a thing. They just kept paying the bills. And I'm sure the folks at GT Strategies were like, I wonder how far we can push this. Like, how many times can we go to the well before we get our fingers tapped a little bit? Well, apparently they can go 60 million times before anyone within the Liberal government and the bureaucracy said, we started at 80,000, we're now at 60 million. Did we miss a zero somewhere? Or is this legitimate? Well, obviously it wasn't legitimate, and Canadians still haven't gotten their money back. But that was just kind of a regular occurrence with this government, as cabinet ministers have handed out sole source contracts to friends and family. The International Trade Minister spent $20,000 in media training to a close friend and staffer inside the office of the Housing Minister, who also paid $93,000 in constituency funds to his sister. Liberals also awarded nearly $100 million in contracts to their good friends at McKinsey & Company, flouting procurement rules along the way. This report sparked serious concerns about cronyism in this government outsourcing their contracts. McKinsey management has a long-standing and deep ties to this Liberal government, and the company employed Dominic Barton as its global managing director from 2009 until his appointment as ambassador to where? To China in 2019. Of 28 competitive bids, 6 appear to have been designed specifically with McKinsey in mind based on the job description. This was a way for them to justify awarding these contracts to McKinsey. They sourced these through immigration, refugees, and citizenship, which were also concerned about McKinsey's growing influence on their policy without any public knowledge. And the Liberal government named the Ethics Commissioner's interim successor. They went to Martine Richard. She was a veteran lawyer in the Commissioner's office, but also happened to be the sister-in-law of the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. And now we have the story of two Randys. You know, a minister from Alberta. And I honestly, Madam Speaker, I don't know how this minister goes back to his riding in Edmonton and looks his constituents in the face and says, yeah, there's two Randys. I'm not the Randy they're looking for. We know he is misleading his constituents. We know he's misleading Canadians. There are not two Randys. The emails prove there's not two Randys. And I would implore the Liberal minister from Edmonton to just come clean, admit that he was his own company, he was still a shareholder and still in power on the decision making when he was getting government contracts during the pandemic. I would hope that he'll go home to his riding and come clean with his own constituents. And now we have Tom Clark. Just this week, Politico reported that the Liberal NDP government not only decided to purchase a $9 million luxury condo on Billionaires Row in New York, but Tom Clark, after first saying he knew nothing about this purchase, was now encouraging the government to purchase this new condo because his current living standards in Manhattan just was unlivable. I can't imagine the squalor that Tom Clark was living under in Manhattan. Well, we have 1,400 homeless encampments just in Ontario. And worse still, the decision to purchase this condo only occurred after the Prime Minister visited Tom Clark in New York City, soon after Global Affairs Canada decided to make this purchase on Billionaires Row in New York. Clearly, the Prime Minister takes very good care of his friends in their time of need with an unlimited credit card backed by the taxpayer. And we had clam scam. We've had a number of these scandals that have occurred. But now we have a new one that I'm not even sure many of my colleagues are aware of. But the CRA was duped out of $40 million. Oh, yeah. Someone, in the summer of 2003, a Canadian taxpayer logged on to the CRA account, falsely amended his tax returns, and the CRA was paying out $40 million in fake tax returns. The worst part, Madam Speaker, is it wasn't the CRA who made the discovery that they were inadvertently paying out $40 million. It was CIBC, the taxpayer's bank, raised the alarm like, this odd that this one person is getting $40 million from the CRA. How lax is the accountability and the metrics within this government that $40 million just goes missing without anybody blinking an eye? And I wish I could say all this is surprising, Madam Speaker, but this just seems to be a regular occurrence with this government as we go on and on and on with these scandals. And the truth is, these aren't oversights. These aren't missteps. This is a habit. When you have a couple, I think we can overlook some mistakes, but this is now tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money that the Liberals are making sure they're lining the pockets of their friends, in many cases perhaps Liberal insiders, people within the party, and that's where Canadians have just simply had enough. And the Canadians deserve to see the documents that show exactly how deep this rot goes. And for the Liberal government to be blocking that transparency that the Canadians deserve, and all of us in this House who are elected to represent our constituents. Again, Madam Speaker, I would encourage the Liberal government to honor the privilege of this House, because that means that is the privilege of every single Canadian who sent us here. Thank you.
That's right.